Hey, this is Marcus Washington, MTC Media here at Capital One. 84-83, TCU breaks the hearts of the Georgetown Hoyas with a last-second shot by Emmanuel Miller. He banked in a three at the buzzer from a little bit inside midcourt. We'll get to this later. I usually start talking about the game and things that are happening, but I'm going to go in reverse order this time around, and I'm going to talk about the post-game press conferences. The post-game pressers could not have been any different. Jamie Dixon came in, the head coach from TCU. He came in and whined and cried about the officiating. Yes, you heard me right. He spent the first 5 minutes of our time whining and crying about the officiating and acting as if he and TCU was a victim of Georgetown's physical play. It was amazing how immature and clueless that was. Jamie Dixon and his teams have always had the reputation of being physical teams. That's why a lot of people like those teams. They are physical. They're 1980-ish with a 2000 spin to them. There's a lot of good things to like about that. But to act like you're a victim and act like he said Miller was shoved out of bounds, just all this excuse making was just, it was wretched. It was embarrassing. I was embarrassed for the kids. I was embarrassed for Jamie. Cooley came in to the post-game presser and just simply said, these referees have worked Final Fours and regionals, and I would want the same three referees in my next game. It wasn't complaining about the officiating. He did address Patrick Stevens, asked the question in the room, which he should ask, which is this something that needs to be reviewed in the offseason by the NCAA Rules Commission of whether a player steps out of bounds should be reviewable? The only way that call is reviewable is if the referee initially calls him out of bounds and he banks it in. Then you can go to the monitor because you can review the call. But because there was never a call made, it means the play is not reviewable, which is why everyone at home and in the arena saw Miller step out of bounds, and the officials couldn't review it to confirm that Miller stepped out of bounds. Now that I've gotten that out the way, on to the game. Georgetown did a lot of good and bad today. In the first half, to be frank with you, once again, the turnovers were an issue, and a lot of turnovers were live ball turnovers. Their inability, and this wasn't just the first half, this was the entire game, their inability to slow down Emmanuel Miller and Jacoby Coles, all the way to the point where Cooley had to go zone down the stretch simply because they just couldn't stay in front of TCU. The first half, TCU lived in the paint. I believe in the first half or early in the second half, TCU had ran up 38 points in the paint. They ended with 44 paint points, and they got 44 paint points in every way you can think of 44 paint points. Off of the bounce, throwing it in, getting offensive rebounds. TCU is a top 10 per KenPom, I believe, coming into this game. They were top 10 in offensive rebound percentage. Today didn't hurt them because they had 14 offensive rebounds for 21 second chance points today. And that is tough. It is tough to win games when you're Georgetown and with Georgetown's roster, to win games where that happens. Now, the flip side of all this, I don't know when was the last time I was in this building where this was this kind of electric building. Georgetown in the second half looked like they were about to be blown out. TCU comes out, scores the first 6 points of the half, runs up, and they led by as much as 15 in this game. As much as 15. And you look at Georgetown's roster and you ask yourself, where are the points going to come from? That was the big thing during the offseason. Man, how is this team going to score 70 points a game? And what you found is, they got some dudes. Ish Massoud's second game back, you saw why Cooley wanted him here. After starting at 1 for 7, Ish ended 4 for 10 from three. I mean, the guy starts getting into a groove. He's knocking the rust off. And Jaden Epps, I don't know when was the last time that I've seen a Georgetown team have a guy that when things break down and things are off schedule, that can get them a bucket. And that's underrated in college basketball. A dude, because everyone after a while knows what you run. Jamie Dixon and his staff from the tip was calling out every Georgetown action from TCU's bench. They called out every Georgetown action. They told you when the flex cut was coming. They told you when the curl was coming. Told you when the pin down was coming. They told everything. So that's one of those things about college basketball, guys. Everyone watches films. But when you have a dude, and Jaden Epps today was that dude for Georgetown who can break down the defense anyway, and then not only get things for himself, get things for other people. Yes, he does have to cut down the turnovers. The 5 turnovers were bad. But what Jaden Epps is getting Georgetown, it's far beyond, I think, what people expected. Styles did not have the greatest shooting day. He was 5 for 14. But I will tell you what, the 18 points and the 6 rebounds, even though you can say it was inefficient, every bit was needed. He was 3 for 6 from the 3-point line. He battled on the boards. It's just Georgetown was not big enough on the boards where they were out rebounded 35-31. But a lot of that damage was done in the first half. Like I said, when you give up 11 offensive rebounds, that's tough. But I think if my memory serves me correctly, 9 of the 11 or 7 of the 11 came in the first half. Georgetown was better in the second half at keeping TCU off of the boards. But again, the negative, TCU shot 52.3%. I mean, at some point you got to guard, zone man, whatever. At some point you got to force them into misses. And Georgetown wasn't bad. They shot 45.3%, but more importantly for Georgetown, they were 12 for 25 from three. If this team is hovering in that 40 percentile in made threes, I'm going to tell you what, Georgetown's going to be in a lot of games, even in the tough Big East. Might not be good enough to beat the UConns of the world and stuff like that, but I'm telling you, they hover around the 40 percentile in 3 points made. And today they were, a shade under 50% from three with 25 attempts. And 25, what I thought was 25 good attempts. So 25 out the 53 were 3-pointers, but they were good 3-pointers. Georgetown wasn't chucking things up. There were 3-pointers in the natural action that they run, and in part because Epps was able to get dribble penetration and distribute and get things for the teammates. Now, there were some struggle buses here. Obviously, the bench was shortened. Cooley only played 8 today. And after a while, you might as well have said 7.5 because he couldn't put Rowan back in the game. This game was one of those games was a little bit above Rowan's pay grade right now. It was too physical of a game for him. And in fact, when he was in the game, Jamie Dixon would seek him out. They put him in screen and roll action. They did everything to seek him out. When he got the ball, they made sure they pressured him. Everything they could to make him feel uncomfortable to the point where Cooley couldn't play him. TCU did, and you can see it was done. It was done by design. As for Supreme Cook, 8 points, 5 rebounds, and a physical presence of all physical presence. Even when there was a little dust up that got Cork tossed out of the game when he shoved them there. Again, TCU is a very physical team. Jamie Dixon always coaches a very physical team. This was to be expected. As Cooley said at the press conference, he has coached against Jamie Dixon coach teams several times, and this is what you get. But I did ask Dixon afterwards about the play. 2.7 seconds left, no timeouts. And how much do they work on these special situations, which they all laughed and said every day, where you're not with timeouts. And by the way, for all the people, now that I'm thinking about this, for all you always have to guard the inbounds guys. Georgetown guarded the inbounds with a 7-footer. And that pass, who was jumping up and down, by the way, Drew Fielder, that pass could not have been a better pass. Now, granted, that pass let him out of bounds. And Jamie Dixon is full of what when he says that Miller was shoved out of bounds, and that was the only reason, and that the referee should have called a foul, so Miller would have been shooting free throws anyway. The post-game presser, which you're going to be able to find on my YouTube channel, because after I get done with this, I'm going to put both post-games on YouTube so you can hear Jamie Dixon and his wine fest. But anyway, he told me that they work a lot on these special situations at the end of practices every day. So when Georgetown decided not to miss the second free throw, they kind of have something that they go to by default. And that's what they went to by default. But for Georgetown, again, a lot of positive. Styles with 18, Epps with 24, Masood with 16, Heath with 10. Heath, they were guarding any sort of thing that put Heath on the wing, any sort of action. They were aggressively over top, so Heath couldn't get the ball. I mean, aggressively over top. They were certainly not trying to let Heath get started, which was interesting, especially because they did a lot of that stuff. They actually spread their own defense out. And I thought it gave Epps driving lanes. And then Epps, who to me is more dangerous because it's not just the shot with Epps, it's the shot and the dribble drive with Epps. It gave Epps ample opportunities to make a serious impact on this game. And Epps certainly did that. He made a serious impact on this game. I can't say it enough. For Georgetown and Georgetown fans, I'm sick for them in the sense of this. I mean, let's just say what we have to say. For 6 years, you didn't get this in this building. You didn't get the electric crowd. You didn't get the guys who, when you suffered the adversity that Georgetown was under, being down 15, being beaten up physically, looking like nothing's going to go right, and those guys reach deep down, and they fight literally possession by possession, fight their way back to having a 6-point lead with under a minute left, and in 25 seconds, the game is tied. There was the three-pointer that was hit at the top. Then there was an offensive foul called on Masood. And then there was another three-pointer hit. And that's how we got to the tie game before at the end, Epps getting tied. And here was the thing. Epps trying to make it where his shot would be really the last shot of the game. And he dribbled the clock down, dribbled it down too much. Should have went at 8. Didn't go until, I think, 6. But kind of got bailed out by the foul. And that's the only reason there was time left on the clock. And, you can argue, yes, after the first one, he could have missed the second one on purpose. But that would be different if you got a layup like the Russians got in 72. You got a guy standing out of bounds who heaves the ball that goes off the backboard that goes in. So it's hard to blame Cooley without being a Monday morning quarterback for not missing the second shot on purpose. And Epps was not brought back to the room, even though he had the biggest game. I feel for those guys. I feel for every guy in that Georgetown locker room because they have been tasked with turning this program around. I mean, literally from the ashes, turning this program around. And they have fought, and this team is getting better. They get a week off. They got Syracuse at 11:30 next Saturday. This arena has to be filled, guys. Now, for 6 years, you were given a reason not to come to Georgetown games. Who wanted to come to Georgetown games? I covered the majority of Georgetown games, almost all of them during that time period. And it was a rough watch. And I understood why people didn't come. But it's what I've told you guys before, sustainability. And this season for me was going to be about, can Cooley put something in that is sustainable, not only for this season, but sustainable for going forward. And if you don't believe that Georgetown is down that track, I don't know what you're looking at. Again, I know it's a loss. This is not rec basketball. You don't get orange wedges and McDonald's, after losses. But if there's ever a definition of a good loss, if there's ever a definition of a program loss, to show where this program is going or where everyone hopes it goes, it was today. It was today. Again, 84-83 TCU with a last-second three-pointer and the win. And give me about 20, 30 minutes. Check out my YouTube channel. You will get both press conferences, and you'll see what I was saying about Jamie Dixon's press conference. This is Mark Wash with MTC Media.